Does picking an outfit have you running a little too fashionably late? We get it. Great taste takes time. That's why Drizzly, the #1 app for alcohol delivery, has your back with the largest selection of beer, wine, and spirits, delivered in under 60 minutes. Convenience never goes out of style. So if you need to spend some extra time in the mirror instead of at the store, download the Drizzly app or go to drizzly.com. That's DRIZLY.com today.
The Venture X card from Capital One gives you premium travel benefits, perfect for seeing Taylor Swift The Eras Tour. Presented by Capital One. Ooh, I do love her. Earn 5 times miles on flights and 10 times miles on hotels through Capital One Travel.
Enjoy your stay in Suite 13.
Whoa, 13? That's Taylor's lucky number. The Venture X card from Capital One. What's in your wallet?
Terms apply. See CapitalOne.com for details.
Hey, it's Mistress Carrie, reporting for duty from MCHQ for episode 114 of the Mistress Carrie podcast. And before I get to this week's guest, Slaine, I want to remind you that while the summer is still in full effect and it's still hot and sweaty, to grab yourself the new Mistress Carrie tank tops in the online store at mistresscarrie.com. You can get them in black or white in men's or women's sizes. And they've got the badass devil horns logo on the front and the Mistress Carrie logo in purple flames on the back. So before the temperatures dip and you need my hoodie and my beanie to keep yourself warm, grab a tank top, just log on to mistresscarrie.com and check out the online store. Okay, this week's guest, I am just so honored to be able to say I can now call Slaine a friend. Slaine, otherwise known on his birth certificate as George Carroll, is a Boston-based hip-hop artist and actor who you'd recognize from films like The Town and Gone Baby Gone. But he's also a writer and a recovery advocate, and he's the Chief Community Relations Officer at Charles River Recovery. I had met Slaine years ago at the old radio station, just in passing in the hallway. But recently, I got to meet him again at the Pike, actually recording commercials. And when I asked him to be on the podcast, not only did he say yes, but he said, I want to come to your studio, which is weird to have a live guest in MCHQ. It's only happened a few times. And we talk about that in this week's episode, about the world moving forward after COVID. Slaine sat down at MCHQ over some coffee, and we talked about his whole life, his upbringing, his musical influences, his acting career, the story behind the first role he ever got in a movie for Gone Baby Gone. He talks about his sobriety journey and what being a father means to him, and about what it's like to help others in recovery. We talked about travel and the rock and hip-hop music he loves, and our shared disdain for the gallbladder. Oof. This is a really powerful and open and honest conversation. And if you know anyone that has ever struggled with addiction, this episode may help you understand them better. And if you may be struggling with addiction, this episode might just push you along in your sobriety journey. So allow me to introduce you to Slaine.
Hey, what's up? This is Sully from Godsmack. Strap on those boots, baby, because you are now in the trenches of the war room with the one and only Mistress Carrie right here on the Mistress Carrie podcast.
What's up? This is Joe Rogan, and you're listening to Mistress Carrie.
Her hair so lovely, pretty eyes.
Hey, this is Brent from Shinedown, and you're listening to Mistress Carrie. Hey, Carrie, go put your bra on, girl.
Hey, this is Steven Tyler, and you be listening to the baddest bitch in Boston, Mistress Carrie.
What's up? This is Aaron from Slaine, and you're listening to Mistress Carrie.
Hi, everybody. This is Dave Grohl from the Foo Fighters, and you're listening to the one, the only Mistress Carrie.
Hey, this is David from the band Disturbed, and you're listening to the baddest bitch in Boston, Mistress Carrie.
Hi, Bruce Dickinson here from Iron Maiden. Yes, indeed, Miss Whiplash herself, Mistress Carrie, is here to unchain your brain.
Hi, this is Flea from the Red Hot Chili Peppers. You're listening to Mistress Carrie.
This is Dennis Leary. You are listening to my favorite, Mistress Carrie.
Hey, this is Corey from Stone Sour, and you're listening to, you have the privilege of listening to Mistress Carrie. Oh, God. Oh, yeah.
All right, Slaine, you're on the record.
I'm on the record. I'm ready to go.
Can I call you that, or should I call you George? What do you like people to call you? Does it matter?
I mean, Slaine is like my nickname. George is the name my mother gave me. So.
Yeah, that's how you know you're in trouble.
Yeah, it's all good. I mean, I don't get offended by either one, or like, it just, they're both me. So
it's like Mistress Carrie. Like, people are like, is Carrie your real name? And I'm like, yeah, but if you call me Carrie Ann, only Mom calls me that.
Problems.
Yeah, you know you're in trouble. Welcome to MCHQ.
Yeah, thanks for having me out.
It's nice to finally be able to have guests in here. COVID was weird.
Weird, especially in hindsight, because when it was happening, it was like, you just kind of accept it. It was there was a lot of fear. It's like, what's going on? And, of course, the media, the 24 hours a day with the death toll and all that.
Oh, yeah.
And now, I was just thinking about this the other day. Like, it hasn't gone away. I finally got it. Everybody I know has had it, right? And it's not that, not that you want it. I'm just saying, like,
yeah. Well, it's different when there's a vaccine.
Did we have to shut the world down? Is it?
Yeah.
I don't know.
I think the vaccine helped a lot, because at least now, if you get it, it's not as bad. And especially if you had pre-existing conditions. Like, imagine going through cancer treatments or being older or anything like that, and then you get this thing. It's like...
Yeah. Well, we talked about it before, too, when I saw you earlier this week. It attacks your weakest thing, right? So that's when I started having this. So I got it after not having it for 26 months, and I got vaccinated. I got the 3 shots or whatever. And I finally got it in Florida, of course. And and it wasn't that bad for the week I had it. It was like a flu. And I thought, all right, now I got the clean test. I'm going to get back to business as usual.
Got the antibodies. I'm bionic.
And I was exhausted for the week after that. And then the week after that, I started getting these terrible attacks in my stomach. And, turns out I have to have my gallbladder removed.
Oh.
So, but I think that might have been what flared it up, was the COVID. So
yeah, it goes after whatever your weakest thing is. I'm lucky I haven't had it yet, knock on wood, that I get the vax, I get the boost. I'm all about, my whole family's in medicine. So it's like... I've heard, this is how it works, and this is this, and I see it from the healthcare worker side, which if you don't have somebody that works in healthcare, you got to talk to somebody that works in healthcare to hear the real deal.
Yeah. What's going on at the emergency room.
Right.
My son's mother's sister, who I grew up with them, she works in the emergency room at Mass General, and she was kind of the one in the beginning who was like, this is no joke.
Yeah.
There's people very sick in there. So, yeah, looking back on it, I really enjoyed the world being shut down for a little while. It was like a forced pause. I needed it, because just being on the go all the time, flying places, traveling all the time, and it was nice to just be at home. And
every musician I know, they feel bad saying it, but they were like, it was kind of nice, because if everything were normal, I would have been out on the road. I wouldn't have seen my kids. I wouldn't have been home. And it's so funny to hear what musicians did to start like hobbies. I talked to Frank Bello from Anthrax. He's like, you should see my tomato plants in my garden. Slash said that he collects those big Lego sets, like the thousands of pieces, like the really expensive ones. He's like, I finally had time to start putting all my Lego sets together. Like jigsaw puzzles, like people were just finding things to do at home that you never in a million years would have had time to do otherwise.
It changed the way I look at life. And, because you spend so long, especially like as an independent musician for 2 decades, you don't wake up every day with like, a lot of people have this misperception, like you're just good. It's like, I don't wake up every day with a check coming on Friday. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like I have to create all my opportunities.
You're self-employed.
Yes. And you're running your own business too, and creating music and living on the road and all that. So it's like you have no time to stop and think about any of it. You're just always creating, you're always moving, and it just becomes a lifestyle and just who you are. So to be forced to live at home, to stay at home, it was a beautiful thing for me, because I realized, like, what am I chasing around the world? What am I doing? Like, I have everything I need right here. My son is 13. He's going to be 14 next month. And, I remember saying to him, because I lived bi-coastally for a decade and I was on tour all the time. And I would come home 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 2 weeks, three. And I was like, buddy, I'm going to be home for like a month straight. I said, I'm going to be home for 6 weeks straight when he was 10. And he said to me, I wish you would stay home for 6 years straight.
Aww.
And that just like shattered my heart. Because really, like, he's my top priority.
Right.
And I think that really came into focus for me. Not that I didn't know that before, but the fact that, I think there's this underlying fear, like, how am I going to live life without doing this thing that is so part of your identity and part of your lifestyle? Like I said, how am I going to exist without it? And then realizing like, oh, yeah, I don't need to do that all the time. So I think I've landed on, I still love to perform, and I'm going to probably do 20 or 25 shows a year, just the ones that I really like. Because a lot of the stuff in there, when you're touring all the time, it's like, it's a grind work. The job is not the performance. The job is the travel.
Every musician that I have talked to, they describe it as, you're not paying me for the 2 hours on stage, you're paying me for the 22 hours off stage.
Right.
The 2 hours on stage you do for nothing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's almost like it's a meditation. And I've learned in my recovery, a meditation is not like this hippy dippy shit like I always thought it was. It's anything that forces you to be in the present moment, that gets you out of the toxic stream of thinking in your head that's incessant, right? And when I'm on stage, I'm completely in the present moment. I have no time to think about anything else. It's just like a very pure thing. And because of that, when you get off stage after, I don't do 2 hours, I do an hour, but when I get off stage after an hour, I feel at peace. I feel great when I get off stage. So that part, and I haven't done that a lot since the pandemic, that part I miss.
Yeah.
But I don't miss being away from my family and the travel. It's really a grind.
I mean, there are good things to it. There are cool benefits that your son gets because he's Slaine's son. The passes, the access, the cool perks.
Maybe.
But you got to earn those with some of the things that, that are hard.
Yeah, it's I wonder about that though. I my son's actually never been to a concert, believe it or not. Yeah.
Never?
Because when he was younger, you got to realize I traumatized his mother. We grew up together, and she was along for the whole ride. And when I say the whole ride, not just all the good stuff and the success and all that, but she was there for the addiction, and she saw me turn into this kind of, I don't want to say monster, but she saw what it did to me, and it took its toll. And I think she associates some of that with that lifestyle, and she has been very adamant about not wanting him to be exposed to things at a young age, like I was, so for good reason. And I've definitely tried to respect that and not kind of put him into an adult world at a younger age. So, but he's getting older now, so we'll get him out to a show.
Well, can we talk about kind of growing up and stuff? Because I'm so lucky that I grew up being on the radio at AAF, which was just a Boston radio station. Then the internet, people can stream the station from other places. But now with the podcast, it's 130 countries, all 50 states, Navy ships, military bases around the world. So the audience, I have to remind myself that Boston references aren't going to get understood by everyone.
Picked up by
now.
everybody, right?
Yeah, because it's like
it's inside baseball.
That exactly. So for anybody that doesn't know who you are musically as the artist Slaine, because you're a Boston-based hip hop artist, you're also a recognizable Hollywood actor that they may recognize you in different roles, but ending up doing that as a kid from the neighborhood in Boston growing up, that's a long way to go for you.
Yeah, it's even more unlikely than you might think.
Well, let's start at the beginning. So, born in Boston?
I was born in Dorchester.
Okay.
1977. I lived in the Lower Mills section of Dorchester outside of Adams Corner. My dad was a Boston public school teacher. My mother worked in a flower shop behind the house. It's a place called Cedar Grove Gardens. And, it was these kind of neighborhoods don't exist anymore. Like sometimes when we talk about Boston or whatever, like the landscape in Boston has changed so much.
Yeah, it really has.
That it's unidentifiable compared to the way it used to be. Like when I was growing up, it was very much old school Boston. Like it was a family neighborhood. Everybody in the neighborhood had multiple kids. There's actually a woman that works at the recovery center now who grew up across the street from me. Their family had 13 kids. There's another family with 8. There's another, there was 100 kids in the neighborhood growing up. And I was very much like a gentle kid, like a sweet kid, but in kind of a rough environment to be that age with that many kids. Like,
yeah.
I reference it to my son because I don't think my son I don't think he's ever been in a fist fight to this day. And when I was a kid, I was in a fist fight every day. And I got my ass kicked quite a bit, because there was a wide age range of kids. And as a little kid, I got the shit kicked out of me.
And you have to differentiate yourself in the neighborhood. You either got to be the funny kid or you got to be the tough kid, or like it's a microcosm of the world that you got to find your lane and your space and find respect and your own crew of people. It was just such a different era too, though. Like I remember the cable guys walking up and down the street. Like cable was just coming around. You know what I mean? Like when you look at, like, you talk about being able to reach 130 countries. You're on Spotify with this? Yeah. I mean, like, I have a Spotify channel, and I have over 110 million streams on my Spotify, which I know, like, relatively speaking, Post Malone does that in an hour of his record coming out. But for me, like, for a kid from the neighborhood in Dorchester,
like, wow, you know, like that, to think like you can reach that many people. But back then there was no internet. Cable was just kind of starting out. You know, there was no cell phones, and, you know, we'd go and call for people and bang on their door, you know. Ride bikes, home when the street lights are on. It's a different upbringing. It was a different time. It was a different time.
So when you were growing up in the neighborhood, what was the soundtrack of it? Because for me, everything revolves around music. And I go back to like certain points of my life and growing up based on the music that was on in the house. So are you the only musician in the family? Does it run in the family?
No, it doesn't run in the family. Yes, I think, well, I want to, you know, I think my Uncle David used to come by. We used to have these big Christmas parties and stuff like that. And my Uncle David, rest in peace, he used to come over and play the guitar and stuff. And I remember everybody partying, and I was a kid. And but that was only really, you know, my exposure to music was what my mother listened to, right? So we had like a Volare, and she used to drive around. She was young. My mother was a young mother. I think she was 21 or 22 when she had me.
My mom was 19. So you grow up different when your parents are young.
Yeah. So you know, but my father was like 11 years older than her. So it was a different dynamic. But she used to drive around and listen to all like the 70s and 80s music. So that was my first exposure to music. My first exposure to hip hop was at the end of my street when I was a kid. I was a little kid, and I didn't know that it was him at the time, and he wasn't even. But Donnie Wahlberg, there was a kid breakdancing, and he had the cardboard out and was doing all this breakdance, and I was like, I thought the guy was cool. Years later, I found out it was Donnie Wahlberg. And you know, and then I moved around a lot after that, and that was kind of, you talk about like needing to be the funny guy or the tough guy or whatever. And I think that's like, as I got older with that, and I was always moving to different neighborhoods and going through different circumstances, that's when the booze and the drugs came in, because then that was like my adapter. Because really at the end of the day, and I know this about myself now, I'm still just that kind of sweet, gentle kid.
Right.
And that's not acceptable. You know what I'm saying? As you get older, and you have to, you know, because those fist fights didn't stop when I was a kid. Like, you know, that's something that you kind of carry forward and like a survival mechanism. And I'm not able to really do that without something to ease into that.
Right.
You know?
So what was, if you had to think of some songs that your mom exposed you to that really planted the seed of a love of music, like what is that soundtrack to your childhood? What songs do you remember?
Oh man, I mean, she, you know, it was big stuff at the time. I mean, like my mother listened to Stevie Wonder and Michael Jackson and all that stuff. Like you talking about, like, you know, the early '80s.
Yeah.
Phil Collins, and you know, it was like she listened to mainstream stuff. But that stuff at that time was like, it was great music.
Oh yeah.
Hall and Oates. I mean, I can still now. That's the thing. You know, I have a love-hate relationship with the streaming stuff, but that's kind of the beauty of it. You have access to all this music, and you could just get rocketed back in time. And
when we were kids, we had to work for the music.
Yeah,
you had to go get it. You had to save
but that
up
was
the money.
a great part of it. So as I got older, I remember going into to Tower Records, like as a teenager. Like I would smoke a bone. I would go to Tower Records. I would spend the day at Tower Records. And
music people can do that.
Yeah.
It was like going to church. You go to the record store. Oh.
Well, you know, because I also have a Walkman, right? So it's like I'm back when it was tapes, right? and even though they had the CDs, I would buy the tapes because they were cheaper and I could get more music. So I would spend the day, you know, figuring out what I'm going to get.
Yeah.
And then I would listen to it on the train ride home, you know, and I would read the liner notes, and I know who produced everything and where it was recorded and all that. Like, I think that's the experience that's kind of missing from. So as amazing as it is to just have access to anything in your pocket all the time, you can listen to anything you want right now.
But there was an emotional and like visceral connection to it. You had to earn it. You had to go get it.
Yeah.
And then it was like, okay, I worked for this. Now I want to know everything about it. And you couldn't Google it.
Nah. It was magazines and all that, right? And the artwork was so essential. It was part of the body of work, which I still look at it like that, by the way. But I think that's lost with the streaming because it's just a little icon with the cover art.
It's why vinyl's coming back.
Yeah.
It's because people are yearning for that physical connection.
And kids like that. Somebody told me, a few friends of mine have told me, oh, my daughter or my son bought your vinyl. And
yeah.
I say, oh, cool, you know.
So when you're growing up listening to the radio with your mom, what you see Donnie Wahlberg spinning on his head on cardboard boxes in the neighborhood, but I have a music theory that you get gifted music that you're exposed to by the adults around.
Yeah.
And then one day you discover something and you go, that's mine. I like that. That's who it was?
Beastie Boys.
So tell me the story.
I wish I could tell you who gave me the tape, but it was a recorded tape. You know, like that's the other thing back then, right? Like, you know, you could only get so many tapes or whatever, but you could record other people's tapes. So I got somebody recorded the Beastie Boys tape for me, and I remember listening to it and just being like, wow. It was just like I'd never heard anything like that. And that was what set the fire to really, after that, like, there was nothing else. There was nothing else except for rap music for me. You know, like, I think rock is cool, like, especially now, like, you know, now versus then, it's a little different because after, you know, when you record and make music for so long, now I would prefer not to listen to hip-hop. Because, you know, it's my job to create music. I don't want to sound like anybody else. I don't want to be influenced by, so it's different. But then, like, it was just like rap music just really resonated with me. As you see, I got the ice cream.
I know, you walked in, I'm like, we look like the most unlikely of friends right now, you know?
Yeah. And but there was just something that really resonated, and so much so that I wrote my first rhyme after I heard that Beastie Boys record.
Did you write before that? Did you write stories or anything? Or
I think I might have. You know, my mother said something about finding some stuff or whatever, and I know she told me like I used to write my rhymes and put them in a shoebox, and I know she said she found a shoebox full of these rhymes when I was 10 years old or something, and she knew then I was an artist. Or
wow!
But that was my first instinct after, and I wrote a rhyme that sounded like the Beastie Boys record, of course, right? Like I was like. And then it was LL Cool J and Slick Rick and NWA, and I just went down the rabbit hole, and I just loved it, you know. And I think starting off writing it like that, I was just imitating whatever. I was imitating Cool J. I was imitating whatever I listened to at that time, you know. And it wasn't until older, when I was older, it became like a channel. In the beginning, I liked the style and all that and kind of the creativity of it. But as I got older and I started to, you know, run into issues and stuff, it became like a coping mechanism to write about what I was going through in my life. And I think that was like probably the most important transition and why I ended up ultimately becoming an artist over time, because, you know, people ask me a lot of times, like, well, what do you like doing better, the movies or the music? And I say, I like making movies better, but I have to make music because I don't know how to live life without it.
Well, there's a lot of correlations between the rock world and the hip hop world. I mean, you know, I interviewed Daryl McDaniels, who I'm honored to be able to call a friend, and he broke down for me how in the early days of hip hop, they were just stealing the beats off of rock records, and that's where it all came from. And with the era that you're talking about, which a lot of kids, because of Spotify, it's not the same now, but the music you listened to when we were young defined you. It said something about your identity. It was a way that you projected to the world who you were.
100%. And I don't think that exists with the kids nowadays.
It doesn't.
Because, you know, I was talking to my son about that, and he was like, no. I was like, you don't have, like, the rock kids and the hip-hop kids and all. And he was like, nah.
Yeah.
You know, I was like,
but back then, it was like...
It was everything.
You wore that band or artist patch on your jean jacket, and it was like, this is who I am, and if you like them too, then we're
you're
friends.
You're part of the same crew.
Right.
And you would describe people, he's the headbanger kid from wherever, you know, or that was just part of the whole lexicon of society and the way that people, who clicked up with who. It doesn't exist the same way like that anymore.
And I've had this conversation a lot when it comes to like music. And for me, the white girl that grew up in a middle class, working class suburb of Boston, when hip hop hit, I didn't get it because it didn't, like, rock music was always the music of the people, the working class music. And so that was reflective of my upbringing.
Yeah.
You know, you're getting your hands dirty, you're making something. My family owned a bakery, an immigrant family. And so rock music, for me, that was my thing. When hip hop hit, I remember when the Beastie Boys and like the people at school that started listening to the Beastie Boys and all that stuff, and I didn't get it. And I remember really bucking against it because it was music that told people's story, but it wasn't my story.
Right.
Like when NWA came out and the whole fuck the police thing, my uncle was a cop in town. And the cops' jobs were to bust the keg parties.
Yeah.
So I was like, why are they mad at the cops? Because I couldn't understand the concept that there were bad cops out there.
Yeah.
Because in my sheltered existence, I didn't see them.
To be fair, you know, because I didn't grow up in like the hood or anything like that. I didn't grow up in like a black neighborhood with police brutality and all that. So that wasn't, I think that the Beastie Boys really bridged the gap with that. And that was kind of my introduction. I think that was a lot of people's, right? So it's, you know, they kind of bridged the gap between rock and hip hop. Sort of Run DMC in the beginning. Like
especially with Aerosmith or Anthrax and Public Enemy. Like there are moments where those bridges got made to the suburban white kids or just the white music audience in general, that it was like hip hop was always there.
Yeah.
But it was the music of the people, and it needed to be like exposed to people that didn't grow up around it.
Yeah, and it's evolved over time. I think that was part of the reason. I mean, as much as I wrote rhymes and loved hip hop music, I thought like, well, I'm never going to actually be like a professional rapper. I didn't think I was gonna be like a professional MC and that I was gonna make a living doing that. Like I think if anyone looked at me at that age, that would be the furthest thing from possibility that I could even imagine. And as a matter of fact, what you talk about with the dynamic of like how you're perceived and what music you listen to, at that time I hid. I wasn't like out actively doing shows and stuff, talent shows or anything. I wasn't out promoting myself as a rapper. I kept it to myself because I didn't want to be made fun of, and I didn't want to be called like a wannabe.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Which at that time was like, it was not a cool thing, especially like, you know, I want to fit in and I want to be, you know, running around with everybody and be a part of. I want to be a part of the group. And really, I felt like an outsider always. And adding to that was like moving around and never being like, you know, I've never felt comfortable, especially if you know Boston, you know, dynamic. Like I never was like a one neighborhood person, or like have that identity. Well, this is where I grew up and this is who I am because of that. Like, and I used to see that as something that was like not good, and now as I'm older I see like that was great. You know, that actually made me able to, it actually is a big reason for the success that I later had, because when, you know, building something independently like that, the more places you've been and the more it's a contact sport, the more people you've touched, the more people that know you, then the better off you are, especially organically speaking in the beginning.
I never realized how sheltered I was. And by sheltered, I just mean, I think it's the same experience with anybody that like grows up in a small town or whatever, that you don't, if you don't move around a lot, you know, if you're not a military family or something where you're forced to kind of relocate a lot, you grow up thinking the town is the world.
Yeah.
And so for me, it wasn't until I started working in radio and well, first when I went to college, because I got exposed to people from so many different countries. And it was like, wow, I never met people like that before. That's amazing. Then when I started working in the music business and I started traveling.
That's the best education I've ever gotten.
100%, yeah.
Because I mean, it's actually, it's a problem. Like if you only stay in one neighborhood or you only stay in one city even, you're really cheating yourself out of what the world is really about. Because when you travel around the world and you see different cultures and different people, I mean, it's really the answer to a lot of things. Like we have so much division because people are just kind of never left where they're from, and they have a narrow-minded view of what the world is about. And I think when you travel around the world, you see the differences in cultures and all that. What you come to understand is people are people.
Yeah.
You know, like, and
they want to do right by their kids. They want their kids to grow up safe and healthy.
And people are doing the best they can with the tools they got.
Right.
You know.
I remember, you know, standing in the mountains of Afghanistan and looking at all of these little girls and thinking, holy shit, I just got really lucky that I got born where I was born and when.
Yeah.
You know, this purple-haired girl standing out there holding a microphone in the middle of nowhere in Afghanistan, where if I had just been born in a different place, my life would be I can't even fathom how different it would be.
Yeah.
So it's like having that open-mindedness, and that especially, you know, to go back to the music and stuff, when I started traveling and when I started meeting people and hearing their stories, then all of a sudden hip-hop music made sense to me because I had never been exposed to the world that they were rapping about.
Yeah.
And then when I saw it, I went, oh, I totally get it. You're telling your story. It's not my story, so of course it's going to be harder for me to understand, but that's your story. And now I have more of an appreciation for it, but it definitely was not an instantaneous love affair.
Yeah.
You know, for me to just all of a sudden love hip hop, because I was that 80s metal head that, you know, gets portrayed on Stranger Things. Like, that was me.
You know, I think what really appealed to hip hop about me too was the storytelling dynamic of it, right? Because I'm a storyteller at the end of the day, and I love stories, and you know, that's why I loved Slick Rick. I love Nas. Like, I like the whole narrative, and you know, that was what really appealed. It was just such a blunt, honest, brutal way to express yourself.
Yeah.
And you know, I didn't find that same thing in rock. now I have a whole different level of appreciation for the musicianship, and especially after touring around the world and all that, to, you know, because I often think about that. Like, we have an easy setup to go set up the DJ stuff and do the sound check and all that. Like, you know, I have friends in bands, and it's a whole nother level of production.
Drums,
instruments,
and 12 guitars.
Yeah, so it's, I mean, and it's beautiful. You know, it's a beautiful thing. I love.
Like, who do you like? What rock music do you like?
I love. Well, first of all, in general, I love music.
Yeah.
You know, like, I love Miles Davis. I love, you know, but I gotta say, and I don't know if it's cliche or not, but I love Guns N' Roses. I love Guns N' Roses. I love the early Guns N' Roses stuff. Yeah. Like, I know you're talking about Slash and knowing him, and I was like, my ears perked up.
I got his little Funko over there too.
Dude, Guns N' Roses to me, at that time, you know, because I just want to keep that one window where it's like before.
It's one of the greatest debut albums in the history of rock music is Appetite for Destruction.
Just incredible.
Talk about kicking the door down and making a statement. Like, this is who we are. Here you go. 40 million copies later.
But I even like that. So I will include in that, I'm drawing a blank, the Use Your Illusion 1 and 2.
Yeah.
I love those too.
A lot of the songs on those records were actually written during the Appetite sessions, and they just didn't go on the record.
I love the song Estranged. It's like an 11-minute song.
Yeah.
I mean, like, when I'll put that on driving at night when I'm feeling a certain kind of way. Well, I jumped into the river. I love that song.
There's been a lot of scientific research that, like, heavy metal music is actually, the people that listen to that are some of the most emotionally healthy because it is that cathartic, like, exercising of the demons that you've got. Like, everybody's got something to be mad about, but people that like that kind of music, they get it all out. They channel it. They go to the shows. They scream. They yell. They pump their fists, and then they leave. And it's that feeling like you were talking about getting off stage where it's like the calm after. It's good for you.
Yeah. There's something about, and I don't even know this. Does Axl Rose write all those lyrics? Because I love those lyrics. They're very poetic.
I think they write the songs together. I mean, it's possible that he's the lyric guy and, like, Slash and Duff are like the music guys, but the dynamic is always interesting to me because I can't write songs. So whether you're writing hip hop lyrics or song lyrics or whatever, like, the idea of coming up with the melody versus coming up with the lyrics, or, like, I had a great conversation with Sully from Godsmack, speaking of Boston musicians, and the relationship that Elton John and Bernie Taupin have.
Right.
That Bernie just writes all the lyrics and hands them over, and Elton John does the rest. But Elton John doesn't write lyrics, yet he writes the music and puts someone else's words to the melody he comes up with, and they don't write the songs together. They've never been in the same room to write a song.
Wow.
And it's like, I don't.
What?
Yeah. Yeah. They
That's
don't write.
Insane to
they
me.
don't
Elton
write.
John he's doing his farewell tour.
Yeah,
right
it was
now.
just at Gillette.
I was caught in the traffic. And I was like, man, I wish I went to that show. I would have loved to see Elton John.
But you're a songwriter. Like, that's the weirdest songwriting relationship I can think of.
It's strange. It's so my experience because I would never perform something that I didn't write. You know, I can't do it. It's just, like I said, for me, it's very much a coping mechanism.
Right.
Like, you know, because as I got older, I went through a lot of different traumatic stuff. And my best friend was always being able to go to that. Back then, I used to write on a pen and a pad. And I would always write what I was feeling, write what I was going through. And it was just I never kept a diary. I never did anything like that. But I wrote these lyrics, right?
It's a very emotionally healthy thing to do.
It's a very personal thing for me, though. Like, I can't say somebody else's words, and I don't want anyone else saying my words, right? So it's like I have ownership of these things. These are my lyrics. This is my life. You know, everybody can have their own, and trust me, people get a perception on your story and try to tell you what your life is like or whatever, but it's the most unadulterated, pure thing that I get to set my narrative and tell my truth, and nobody can tell it for me, and nobody can touch it. And that's like a beautiful thing to me.
And you create something from nothing. 1 minute the page is empty. The next minute a song exists that's completely original, and you did that. Like, for me, it's a fascinating process because I can't do it.
So, but I have collaborated on songs with people, of course, and you know, I stopped sampling because I had my debut solo album, like my first studio album, I spent all these years. I did mixtapes that, did really well. You can get into that part of the story if you want. But after The Town came out, my debut album was supposed to come out. And due to The Town doing so well and me being on the radar at that point, the label pulled the record 11 days before it came out because sample clearances, which I immediately had a nervous breakdown. But, and went into the studio. I was awake for 23 days for the most part, maybe a couple naps in there. It was performance-enhancing drugs keeping me up for that time, but I was also spiraling in this like rush of madness. But during that time, I started to work with a guy named Louis Bell, who was a nobody at the time, but he was a genius. He is a genius, and he started replaying all the samples on the album and then creating original music, and then we started to develop this relationship where I'm writing we would sit together and I would come up with melodies. He would play it bigger and better than I could have ever thought, and he would make stuff up, and I would write lyrics on the spot to the music that he was writing. We would do 2 or 3 songs a night like that. And I remember telling people, I got a nuclear weapon. I got this guy. He's a fucking nuclear weapon. He's a genius, right? And, years later, Lou would go on. Lou is now the #1 producer in the world on the Billboard charts, I think, for years running. So he produces, everyone from he produces all Post Malone stuff. And Bruno Mars, the Jonas Brothers, Camila Cabello. I mean, he's
just a few names that people might recognize.
He's massive, and he's still my very dear friend, and I love Lou very much. It's been a beautiful thing to see all that happen for him, because I always knew that, and we did 3 albums together. So that process of making music with him was very much like a collaborative thing. So I know what it's like to write songs with people, but I always handle the lyrics. I'm not letting you touch the lyrics, Lou. That being said, they have a dynamic, I know, with Post, where Lou does a lot of the music, and then another guy that I know, oddly enough, another Boston guy, Billy Walsh, he writes a lot of the lyrics in those songs. So I've kind of seen that process a little from the outside looking in, of these guys creating these massive hits, and Billy playing me songs before they oh, check this out. And I'm like, wow. And then now it's on the radio. It's like a classic from this era. So that's been like a very surreal, cool thing to watch.
Well, so you're putting your lyrics in a shoebox, right? You're a kid. You're dabbling in some partying and doing that whole adolescence thing. When did you let the cat out of the bag? When did you actually let someone know that you were writing rhymes, and when did you actually start performing in front of people? So my best friend, Mike, I used to spit my rhymes to, but other than that, never let the cat out of the bag. I would record I had headphones like this. I would plug it into the microphone jack on my stereo. I would put instrumental tape on the A side and a blank tape on the B side, and then I would overdub on it, which I didn't know what I was doing at the time, but I was like, it sounds better if I highlight these words on another. So by the time I'm like a 3rd generation tape down with the hook, with everything else. There's a big hiss in it.
And that's how I learned how to do it.
Kids don't understand the cassette struggle.
So I wasn't necessarily, I wouldn't call it partying, right? Because I went very quickly from drinking and smoking weed to like smoking angel dust, doing cocaine, all that, like at the age my son's at now. So it was very much like very dark very quickly. And, I cleaned up a little bit after high school. And by cleaned up, I mean I was just going to drink and smoke weed. And I ended up applying to college. And I went to a school called School of Visual Arts in Manhattan. And when I went there for film, but I never thought I would be an actor or anything like that. I wanted to be like a writer and a director, right? Because hip hop is not really an option as a career. Like but I want to tell stories and I want to make movies. And so I went there, and it's funny because I did take an acting class in the 2nd semester that I was there. And I remember, I forget the woman's name. I wish I remembered all these details, But she was a very passionate Broadway actress, African-American woman from the Bronx, I think. And she was very much like, very passionate about acting. And she would bark on people and she would yell and all this stuff. And everybody had to pick out a monologue, and she just dismantled everybody. Like when they would do their reading, I was going last, I think, and I was like petrified. I was like, geez, like she's just smashing everybody. I'm going to suck at this, you know? And I picked out from the Westies book, Mickey Featherstone. So it wasn't from a movie. It was just from the book. And I did a scene of Mickey Featherstone on the stand ratting, right? And talking about a murder that they committed. And I did it. And mind you, she just destroyed everybody. And she goes, see, now that's acting.
Wow.
And then I got kicked out of school a month later.
Is that how you ended up in New York? Was because you moved there to go to school?
I ended up in New York because I moved there to go to School of Visual Arts to be a writer-director.
How was that, being the consummate Boston kid? The rivalry is a real thing. You feel like you're on enemy territory?
Yeah, it was always a thing, and people made fun. So it was a very interesting thing because people always made fun of the way I talked, and you know, in the beginning, it was I'm surprised I even lasted because this is before I had traveled anywhere, right? I'm very much like a Boston kid, and I'm going to an art school, right? So it's like now I'm in New York City, and, you know, there's all sorts of different kinds of people. And I'm coming from a 1980s, like, Boston Irish Catholic mentality.
With a Larry Bird shirt on.
Yeah, and now I'm surrounded by, you know, people of all different kinds of cultures and sexual orientations and everything else. And I'm like, whoa, this is weird. Like, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
like,
the world is big.
Well, nobody had purple hair like where I was growing up.
Right.
You know, so, like, there, everybody did. And people were, you know... Now I look at it like, cool, that's amazing. Like, that's what you should be around. You know, that's a great thing.
It's a great life experience to get thrown in.
But in the
you're
beginning, I was
into
like,
the deep
what
end.
the fuck? Like, I don't belong here and stuff. But I met this kid, and his name was Joe, and he liked to drink the way I like to drink. And he also liked hip-hop, and he had a turntable in his room and a microphone, and we started recording stuff. So now I'm recording with Joe, and Joe's doing open mics, and I'm like, you go up on stage and do that? And he's like, yeah. He's like Bobito from Stretch and Bobito. He has an open mic at the New Eurekan Poets Cafe in the Lower East Side of Manhattan. So he was like, come with me, I'm gonna rock, right? So I go down with him, and there's this whole culture, like people outside freestyling, and there's ciphers, and, you know, like before you even go into the club, there's a whole life to that outside. People are smoking blunts, and people are chopping it up, and people are rapping, and there's great rappers there. There's like people who I recognize from underground hip hop, and there's people, and they're stepping up, and they're spitting stuff that is not out, and they're competing with other people who are trying to make it, right? And then you go in, and there's this open mic, and everybody's dope, everybody's good, and I didn't think I'm good enough to do that, so I didn't want to go. And I keep doing this stuff with Joe, and then one night he signs me up for the open mic, and they call out my name, and I was terrified, right? I was scared to death. I was like shaking, and I went up and I did my thing, and then everybody gave me props outside where I had already started doing in the cipher, and I started to realize for the first time what made me different, right? The accent, the way that I talk, my experience, right? So all these years I'm writing, trying to sound like LL Cool J, or trying to sound like the Beastie Boys, or trying to sound, and I started realizing during that, and this was over a little bit of time, this is what makes me different. This is what I need to focus on. And that was how it began.
Is that how it's acceptable? I'm trying to find the right way to ask the question that I want to ask. Like, because it's your story, it's not appropriation. Because you're a white kid from Boston trying to break into hip hop, where you don't belong. But is that how you find your way? Is that you're telling your story, and so,
you know, I think you know, there's different people who would have different viewpoints on that.
Yeah.
I'm sure somebody would tell you I'm appropriating hip-hop culture or whatever. It's like, the only thing that I know is that I loved doing this, and this is my coping mechanism, how I get through life. And now, you know, I'm just telling my story. So I try not to think of like the whole, look, where, you know, in Boston in general, we have this culture where people will tell you, and maybe it's a human thing, but I think it's particularly in Boston, is where people will tell you why you can't do something.
Yeah.
You know, who you fuck you think you are? Okay, dude, you're going to do that. You think you're going to be this, or you're going to do that. And that is such a crippling thing, especially when you want acceptance from all your friends and your family. Like, right? This is family. People in your family who will tell you that, aunts, uncles, whatever. Like, you know, people don't necessarily empower you in that way to like go and, you know, do you. Chase your dreams. Do whatever you.
But I guarantee you that you're like me, that the no motivates you, right?
Absolutely.
There's nothing you can do.
I'm a contrarian.
Yeah. There's nothing you can do that is going to make me work harder than telling me I can't do something and telling me I won't do it and telling me no.
Defiance.
Because the Boston in you wants to shove it up their ass.
Yeah, that's right. Defiance. Defiance is the personality trait that, you know, defined me in my younger years, you know. So, yeah, I didn't think much about that. I just knew that that's what I like to do. And then I think I became hyper fixated on it.
Yeah.
You know, where it was like, this is it. So Joe and I got in a fight. Excuse me. Joe and I got in a fight with somebody, a doorman at the school, and we had to leave the school freshman year. There's a whole story behind that too. But, yeah, so I had to leave film school, but I was good with that because that was kind of weird for me. And like, I think that what I thought film was going to be was different at that time, you know, and I'm just going to concentrate on hip hop. And that's what I did.
Yeah. Sometimes finding out what you don't want to do when you don't know what you want to do is a good thing. Like, I always thought I was going to be a recording engineer in a studio. Like, growing up, because I loved music but didn't have the musical ability, I thought, watching Motley Crue videos on MTV, I wanted to be the person behind the console that knew what all the knobs did.
Yeah.
I didn't know what that person's job was. I just thought, I want to do that. But they didn't have a college for that. So I went to college for communications because I thought I'll learn how to record audio. And that's a skill I'm going to need. Then after my freshman year, I did a recording studio internship. And I'm like, here we go.
Yeah.
I'm going to be smack dab in the middle of the Motley Crue video. And I was smack dab in the middle of recording a 27-piece mariachi band, one maraca at a time. And I was like, this is not what I signed up for. Like, this isn't the crazy behind the scenes. And you work in a recording studio, like, you work in a soundproof room talking to yourself. It's not what people would imagine it would be most of the time.
I've spent tens of thousands of hours in recording studios. And it's funny because I think what I probably left out was earlier on, like, I thought, like, you know, that's part of why I was at film school. Like, I didn't think I was really cut out to be like the MC or on camera. Like, that didn't really appeal to me as much. Like, I loved writing and telling these stories. So that's why I went to school to be a screenwriter, right? Like, that's what I wanted to do. I want to be behind the scenes. And even when I thought about music, I was like, well, maybe I could be like a producer or an engineer or something in the background. And it's funny because the universe had a different plan, you know, because, you know, I thought that I was done with film or whatever from that moment that I left film school, and that music was going to be the way. And then by a miraculous set of circumstances, I ended up acting. And we could talk about that if you want to.
Yeah, well, that's what I mean. Like, I thought I was going to be the recording engineer. And then halfway through the summer, I realized this is not what I want to do. But the radio station, AAF, was around the corner in Worcester at the time in the early 90s. And I was delivering commercials. And I brought them over and started talking to the production guy. And he asked me to intern for him for the summer. And then my goal was, just like you, I'll be the producer.
Yeah.
I'll be the person that works for the people that are behind the microphone. And that is what I thought I was going to do. And I applied to be Opie and Anthony's producer. And because I thought, Howard's got Robin. Opie and Anthony should have this purple-haired rock chick roadie. I was a roadie at the time, rigging lights and building stages and driving semis, paying off my college. And I was like, oh, I'll be their producer. I put together the most horrendous demo where I was doing impressions. Like, I don't know who the hell I thought I was. I didn't get the job because I ironically didn't have the production chops, but they asked me if I ever thought about being a DJ. And I was like, no. Thankfully, after I told them no and then told Opie and Anthony, like, I didn't get the job, they were like, well, what did you say? And I said, well, they asked me if I ever wanted to be a DJ. And I said, no. And Opie was like, this is one of the most influential rock stations in the country. Hundreds of people send demos to try and get jobs here. Turn around and go tell them yes. Thank God, and I don't think people say this sentence a lot, thank God I took career advice from Opie.
Yeah.
Because I went back down the hall and said yes. And then like 6 weeks later, one of the people on the weekends got fired. And they threw me on the air on the weekend for a couple of months. And then Opie and Anthony famously got fired for saying Mayor Menino had died in a car accident in Florida on April Fool's Day.
Right.
And that opened up that's how I started on the air full time on AAF, was because Opie and Anthony got fired.
Wow.
And the night guy at AAF got put on in the afternoon, and they said, we're going to take this girl with no real experience, but there's something there. It's raw. I didn't know what not to do. So they just threw me in there.
See, I'm a really big, and not a religious guy, but I'm very big higher power guy, universe guy.
Yeah.
Like, things happen, right? So it's always funny to me, like, people who are more reluctant to be on camera or to be on the air or whatever end up being the ones who are better at it, right? Because a lot of times people who are motivated to be like a movie star or on the microphone or the camera, they're in it for the wrong reason.
Yeah.
You know, like, you want to be involved in telling the story and all that, but maybe reluctant, like, to think like, well, maybe I should.
You don't
be the
think
one.
your story's interesting enough.
Yeah, but you love the craft and you love the work and all that, and then I think the universe or whatever that power is, right, has a way of pushing that energy up to the forefront because it's pure. It's pure. Like, I never got into hip hop music to be a big rap star. I never got into any of it to acting to be a movie star. I just want to be a part of it.
Yeah.
Like, I just want to be a part of telling stories and creating. Like, I have a really pure drive to create. I love it. It's part of who I am. It's part of what I've always been fascinated with, you know? And I think that's when I'm listening to hip hop, even if it's I'm fascinated by the story, even if I can't necessarily relate to that aspect of it. I like the story. I like the process. I love that stuff.
You talk about your meditation being on stage.
Yeah.
For me, it's this.
Yeah.
Because right now in this studio, you're the only thing that exists to me.
Yeah.
And it's not my story. It's your story. But I love finding the way that people that come from different backgrounds and different people find those commonalities that are woven together that make them similar. And I love digging. It's like an archaeological dig for me. Like, I love telling people stories and I love music. So if those are my two loves, it's kind of obvious in hindsight that I would end up doing what I'm doing. Like, I was the kid with the little cassette player, like you where you were rhyming and like overdubbing. I had the little cassette player with the little plastic microphone, and I used to go around and talk into it, and then I used to hide it in the houseplants because I was fascinated by the concept of what adults talked about when they kick kids out of the room. I wanted to know.
Wow.
So I bugged the goddamn houseplants to find out. And I always got caught because I would time, okay, it's a 45-minute cassette, and then I'd have to go in and flip it over, and I always got caught flipping over the cassette. Like, I was an idiot.
Yeah.
But you look back now, it's kind of obvious that we both kind of ended up, like, you always loved film.
Yeah.
You always loved telling your story and having this creative outlet. It doesn't shock me at all that you found your way back to film through your music career.
Yeah, which is, I've told this story before. I mean, but so then I end up coming back to Boston and actually right before 9/11. It was 8 months before 9/11. But, my high school sweetheart, who's my son's mother, Not at the time she wasn't, but she had moved out to New York. So we were dating, the whole time that I was in New York, and she moved to New York and she hated it. And we lived in Brooklyn and she wanted to move back. And so I begrudgingly did so. I was like, oh, I'm just getting this hip hop. At this time, MC Shan is managing me. I'm going in for record deals and have demo tapes. And, there's a whole kind of New York experience I might be leaving out there, but I end up coming back to Boston, and when I come back to Boston, I think it's over. Like, my career is over. I'll never be able to do, and I got this resentment to her, like, I love you, but I'm coming back for you.
You ruined my life!
Yeah, you killed my dreams, right? And it ended up being the best thing that ever happened to me, because I ended up building this thing here, and that's what at this time the drugs are I'm really spiraled into the drugs now, because the whole time I'm in New York, I'm living in that culture too. I'm selling drugs back and forth. I'm transporting drugs back and forth from New York to Boston. I'm fully immersed in that life now. When I come back here, she left me. She kicked me out because of my drinking and my drug use. And, I don't care, because I'm so focused on this hip hop shit now, right? And I get this guy to invest in me, and neighborhood big shot drug dealer, and that did not go well. It went really south. And I'll save those stories for a book someday, but it went south. And then I got another drug dealer to invest in me, and we end up, so the plan is to build our own recording studio and start our own record label, right? And we got this warehouse in Roxbury, and we're framing it out. The woodworkers are in there framing them out, framing out the rooms and stuff like that. And
for anybody that doesn't know the neighborhoods you're talking about, Roxbury is a pretty rough part of Boston.
Yeah, and it's a warehouse, so it's over kind of near where Mass and Cass is, right? It was on a street called Shirley Street, kind of near the old Victoria Diner. That's what's at the end of the street where Mass Ave is, right there. So I'm living in there, and we're doing after-hours parties in there, and we're like, I'm recording, and we're building a studio so we don't have to go to other studios and all that. And he ends up getting busted, and he's looking at 10 years, and he falls out of the picture. Now, I'm unemployable at this point. I'm in and out of detox, and my friends that I grew up with are all dying and going to jail and drug addicted and I was too. So I'm squatting in this warehouse for about 8 months, and everything starts going out. There's no hot water. There's no electricity. I have a cell phone that I'm charging at an after-hours spot up the street, which was a bar that a girl, I'm still friends with her to this day, but her dad sold the liquor license, and she just kept it open for friends and family. It was a bar. There was pool tables in there and stuff like that. It was like this little back neighborhood spot. And I would charge my phone in there. And during the process of that time, I had connected with Danny Boy from House of Pain, and, he got me this production deal with DJ Lethal. So I'm now have pressed up 50 mixtapes, right? And, of this mixtape I did called The White Man is the Devil. And it was about cocaine. And it was about my life at the time, really. And we pressed up 50 copies of that. And I gave 10 each to 5 different drug dealers. And if you wanted to buy a 40 bag of cocaine, you had to take the CD too. So it was $50, right? We sold 13,000 CDs like that. So...
Oh, my God.
At the time, I didn't realize what I was doing but I was writing from the center of this blossoming drug epidemic, because I was part of it. I'm just writing my life, so I didn't really realize it was part of a much bigger thing.
Well, that's what I was trying to figure out. If you're so motivated with music and so myopically focused on this passion and creativity, an outsider would be like, "Why are you messing around with the drugs? Why are you why would you waste your time and health and money and all of that stuff with the drugs?" But it sounds like at that time it wasn't possible to have one without the other. That you couldn't do the music without the drugs.
It also, I talk about music being a coping mechanism my coping mechanism. Drugs and alcohol were my coping mechanism to deal with a lot of things that happened in my childhood that I didn't want to face.
Yep.
It also allowed me, it let me be fearless. You know, like it, so, you know, I got this voice in my head that tells me, you're never going to get what you want. You're not good enough the way that you are.
Nobody wants to hear your
You're
stories.
You're going to lose everything you have, right? That voice is prevalent in my head, right? And I know that voice now to be addiction. When I drink or use drugs, that voice goes all the way away. You know, I can fight who I have to fight. I can do what I have to do. I feel connected. I feel empowered. It changes my perception and the way that I look at the world. And most importantly, it changes your perception of me in my mind, right? So I feel comfortable in my own skin. It's a necessity. That I don't know how to do, at this point in time, I don't know how to do anything without that. Like, I can't.
That's a really interesting description, because for people that don't have an issue with addiction, it's hard to understand. Like, I'm fortunate that that is not something that I have to deal with, that there's not a history of it in my family. There's other, trust me, there's plenty of other issues there. But you being able to articulate that, to get someone that's never dealt with it to understand what it's like, that I don't think I've ever heard anybody explain addiction that way.
I don't think I understood it because I started trying to get sober when I was 18. It was clear that I got pulled into by the guidance counselor when I was 16. Like, it was clear I had a problem for a long time. And I always thought it was the substance. Well, if I just don't smoke angel dust, if I just stay away from the cocaine, if I don't drink hard liquor, and I dice that up a million ways till Sunday. Like, at the end of the day, all paths are leading back to zero, because what addiction truly is, it has very little to do with the substance, right? And we can argue whether it's trauma and all these things that make you more susceptible to it, and that's all valid stuff.
Brain chemistry stuff. There's a bunch of different
all valid
variables.
stuff. We could go down the rabbit hole with that in a whole different episode, but at the end of the day, that disease exists without the substance. I take the substance to treat the illness. And I think that's what people miss. It's a choice. It's not a disease. You choose whether you pick that up. Yeah, but when you have something that is burning so bad and the only relief from it, something that is torturing you when you're sober, and the only relief that you get is with the substance. And it doesn't matter. There's no difference between alcoholism, heroin addiction, cocaine addiction. The substance is irrelevant. The disease exists before it. Now, what helps you quell that, everybody has a different thing. What your drug of choice is a different thing, but the illness is the same. But I digress. So on this particular night, the Boston Herald was going to write a story about me the next day. So now I've gotten a buzz in the city. And
are you fearful of rap success because of the way that you were living your life? Like, if you're in the drug world and now you hear the Herald wants to write a story about you, the success could also bring you down.
I have no fear of anything when I'm drinking and
getting
high.
Okay.
That's why I do it.
Yeah, no, I get it.
I'm not afraid. I feel like anything is possible, that
Yep.
I'm connected and all that. Like, that's my higher power at that time, is drugs and alcohol. It empowers me. It makes me, it's that even Slaine, it's like, do I care if I'm called Slaine or George? Slaine is the version of myself that is fearless and that could be the protector of me, right? Like, and I think it's an interesting thing about hip hop, because we all create this larger than life character, right? I think in entertainment in general, but
yeah, Mistress Carrie's different than Carrie,
right? And it's and for me, what I know now is, like, that's the version of myself that I want to be. You know what I'm saying? That can protect the fearless version, the one who's indestructible, the one,
Usually the name on the birth certificate's the sensitive one.
Yeah, and that's very much so with me, too. So on this night, I knew the Herald was writing a story for me. I left that after hour spot at 7 a.m. I walked up to the intersection of Mass and Cass, and I got every Herald on the rack, and I walked back to the warehouse that I was squatting in. I had a ladder that would climb up to where I had a mattress in the back corner of the staging, so that if anybody came into this building, they couldn't see me up there. I would have time to kind of suss it out, right? And I read that Boston Herald article, and I remember laughing, and I passed out, and I woke up at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and I had dozens of missed phone calls, and a lot of it was people that had seen the article, friends saying, "Oh, I seen you in the paper, dude, blah, blah, blah." But a bunch of the calls were from media outlets, and specifically they were calling because a casting agency was trying to get in touch with me because Ben Affleck was in town, and he saw me in the Herald, and he wanted me to come in and audition for his movie.
So you didn't seek out
No.
Gone Baby Gone at all?
Not at all. Wow. I never sought out acting or making movies ever since I left film school. It wasn't on the to-do list. It wasn't on the agenda. It wasn't something that I considered.
So they tell you what? You got a voicemail on the phone that Ben Affleck wants you to come and audition.
I got lots of voicemails, but the writer from the Herald, he was like starting to cover my career. It wasn't a career yet, but he thought I was great, right? And Chris is still a good friend of mine, but he was like, "Dude, fucking Ben Affleck wants you to come in. Like, go in there and audition for this role." And so I called the casting agency back, a woman, Carolyn Pickman. She's like, "Yeah, we want you to come in. Can you come in today?" And I was like, "I can't come in today, you know." Again, like your Opie and Anthony, like with the, I can't do it, like the reluctance of it.
Like,
it's like
you now is like, what the fuck? You said yes.
like, go, dude.
Go.
So I went the next day, and I went. I got drunk before I went in. Like, not just a little drunk. I had like 10 beers and 10 shots in like an hour and a half leading up to it. And I went in there and I was, talking shit and all this stuff, and Ben was asking me about myself. And I was in sweatpants. I mean, like, I just crawled out of this warehouse, right?
Oh, my God.
And they brought me back in a bunch of times. And 5 times, I think it was.
Were you sober the other 4?
I was. So after that, like, I started staying at a friend's house of mine because I was like, I need to be able to shower and stuff, right? Because I had this no hot water, so I would shower at the place I was at. There was a shower in there, but it was so cold. It was like ice cold. It wasn't like set on cold when you have hot water. That's a different kind of cold. I'm talking about no hot water, right?
Like almost pipes freezing
cold.
cold.
I have rashes on my body from the soap because I don't get it all off and stuff like that. And and I ended up getting that movie. And at the same time, so I met Danny Boy a few years prior and recorded some stuff with DJ Lethal, which was on that mixtape. And Everlast came into the fold, and those guys were broken up for 10 years. Now, House of Pain to me, when I was a kid, so I know I talked about Beastie Boys. I skipped over the fact that I had House of Pain posters all over my wall. Could you talk about an Irish kid from Boston? I go into Tower Records and I see, before I ever heard Jump Around or anything, I see that record with the Shamrock on the cover, and I turn it over and they're in the bar room on the back, and I was like, this, right? And I bring that home and I burn that CD out when I got that,
And then the video comes out, and anybody from this area is like, hey, that's us.
Yeah. It was, it was magic. Like, for me, like, I was like, that was everything I loved. So, when I meet Danny Boy, and then that kind of evolves into, I was going out to, Lethal is flying me out to LA. I'm recording with LA. Then I'm flying back to this warehouse, right?
And talk about guys that had success in hip hop, but also found a lot of success in rock.
Yeah.
Between Limp Bizkit, Everlast, and his solo career, those acoustic Everlast songs are all over rock radio.
So when I found out that I got the Gone Baby Gone role, I was actually in the car with Lethal, right? So my life is very surreal at this point, because now it's like, and it was like, and this is a 10-year period between that open mic at the New Eureka and getting kicked out of SVA and all that. And then, so there's a lot of stuff in between there. But now it's like, it seems like I'm at my lowest point, it seems like I'm at my lowest point, and then all of a sudden this stuff starts to kind of come
the
to
universe,
surface.
like you said.
Yeah. And it was real, and then to make it even more, so I hadn't talked to my son's mom. This was before we had my son, so I hadn't talked to the high school sweetheart in a year and a half since she kicked me out for my drinking and drug use, and I got food poisoning. So every time I get food poisoning, like a major shift in my world comes, and I called her and I was like, I have food poisoning. Will you come take care of me? And she was like, and she came and she's like, what the fuck are you doing living in this fucking spot? Are you live here? Like it's, it's, and I was like, I got a movie role, like, and she's like, she took me to, she rented a hotel for me. She rented a hotel for us, and she drove me to my first day shooting on Gone Baby Gone. And we stopped, and she got me all these toiletries. Like she couldn't believe like how much of a mess I was. She got me all these toiletries. So my first day at Gone Baby Gone, I showed up with a little trash bag of toiletries, and the PA there was like, we have all that stuff. If you need something, you can just tell us. Like if you need like a toothbrush or whatever, you can just tell us. And that was the first day that I shot on Gone Baby Gone. We ended up getting back together, and we got married, and we have my son. So,
when you show up, living the life you're living on a movie set, and movie sets, while a lot like recording studios or whatever, they're not like people think they are. But there's certain parts of it that are. The trailer, the good catering, all the shampoo you need, like the runner to go. You want something? I'll go get it for you.
Yeah, well,
talk about culture shock for you.
It's set up to make and of course, like I'm walking outside, they have lobster tails and filet mignon for lunch. They have craft service all day. You can get snacks and all that. And but it's all set up so because I learned this years later, but the actor, you have to memorize that stuff, right? Like you have to be very focused. Like, there's a lot of stuff that goes into that, and you just need to be able to focus on that, right? So like when you're talking about movies that are spending tens of millions of dollars to make, they want you to like have your shit ready to go.
Every minute
don't
you're
worry
not
about anything
ready.
else. Just focus on that. We'll get you fucking food. We'll get you whatever you need. We'll take care of anything you want. Just focus on this.
Learn your lines and be ready to go.
That's it. Because it costs, we're on the clock. There's a lot of people on the salary right there, And, man, that was a spectacular experience.
So I love that movie so much. And I look at scenes, especially when you go into the house with the drugs and the molester upstairs and you do the whole thing. Was that all written exactly that way? Because to me, it comes across in your performance that you were given freedom to kind of ad-lib and make it sound authentic.
So after working with a lot of different directors, I'll say this about Ben, but Ben is just like a spectacular director. I don't think he gets the credit that he really, he's a phenomenal director, like not just a good one, a great one. And I happen to know why. Because he's very much an actor's director, because he's an actor, right? So he understands the process, and he's very true to the story and wants it to be authentic, right? So he listens to people, and he builds it with you, and he gives you the freedom to do this stuff. That particular scene, actually, the way it was in the movie is very close, if not exactly, to the way it was written.
Really?
But he had me through both movies I did with him, he always had me throw in my own stuff, and he used a ton of it. Like he would be like, just, how would he say it? How do you think this guy would
Please
say it?
tell me that Marmaduke was not in the script.
That's in the script.
Shut up, really?
That's in the script.
When that word came out in that scene, I was like, oh my, because that's such a thing someone would say. And I was convinced that was something you threw in there.
I put the diddler in there. I'm going to go in the back. You look for the diddler. I put that. I remember that. It's hard to remember some of that stuff too, because it's like you're doing the scene a million times and you cut it up some different ways. But that That was, that scene really came out. Let me tell you, the first time I ever saw, because the thing about being like uncomfortable I was never motivated by being on the screen, big screen or anything like that. So the first time I saw myself in the screen, I was like, oh no, I hope I don't suck, because I just see my big fat head up there, and people liked it. It was well received, and I remember stopping after I went to the premiere. I remember I was driving by a movie theater. I want to say it was like the Dedham movie theater or something, and I saw that it was playing, and I pulled in and I just bought a ticket to the movie and sat in, and I was just in awe.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's a fantastic film. And talking about the way that your music career was so interwoven with the drugs.
Yeah.
You end up in a film where all of that drug experience helped your performance.
100%. 100%. And that's the thing too, is my music career also was fueled by so it's like, how do these things coincide? I mean, in my head, I need it. See, I can't be Slaine without the drugs and alcohol. And I don't know how to record like that. I don't know how to get on stage sober. I don't know how to tie my fucking shoes. I don't know how to face the world like that, right? So it's like it was very interwoven. That being said, you're right. Like in a here's the difference with in a recording studio or a show, I can show up fucked up.
Right.
And I did. And it was expected. And I would lock myself, talk about 10,000 hours to master your craft. I didn't leave the studio. I would stay 3-4 days. I'd be on benders, up on coke. I would record a dozen songs. Half of them might suck. It doesn't matter. I'm just keep going, like churning it out, You can't really do that on a movie set because over the course of 12 hours shooting, and they shoot you 10 different ways and all that, you can't be slurring 6 hours into it. And
but your drug expertise helped Ben with the movie, though, to really make it authentic. To be an advisor in that way.
Oh yeah, with the. So we have. I remember coming out and when we're in that Tread House scene, and they had the coke in a Ziploc bag at the bottom, and I was like, this isn't the way that you bag coke. And he was like, well, how would he do it? I was like this. And I tapped it in the corner, and then I ripped off the thing, and then I rip it with my teeth, and I tie it together like this. And he goes, bag 50 of these.
But for anybody...
Not to me, to the prop people.
Yeah.
He turns to them and goes, bag 50, make me 50 of these.
But for somebody like me watching that movie, I wouldn't have known the difference.
Yeah.
Because I'm like one of the only people that works in the music business that's never touched cocaine. And when I tell people that, they're like, there's no fucking way.
Are you disgusted by it? Like when you see, because you've seen people do coke.
I've seen 1,000 people. It just, to me, I'm so fucking hyper anyway.
Yeah.
That I've seen people be super obnoxious on it. And
instant asshole.
And I was never the person that needed to be woken up. Like if people were up all night or whatever, like I was never the person that needed the help getting back up again.
Yeah.
Because I like I said earlier, I'm fortunate that I don't have that addiction disease. Like it's not something I've had to tackle. So, I could go to a party and have a couple drinks. It became very obvious to me early on, being female, working in the music business, that I didn't want to be in a vulnerable position. I mean, in the early days when I first started AF, it's like, look, we were partying. Like, it's what everybody did. You go out, you're drinking, doing shots, whatever. But it became obvious to me early that I wasn't going to be dating the bands.
Yeah.
Because I wouldn't get respected that way. And I didn't want to be the girl that was fucked up and vulnerable at the party. And then it became obvious that I got to get home. And if I lose my driver's license, I'm not going to be able to get to work. So I associated the partying as something that I needed to be around. All my friends are musicians. They're backstage at the show. They're all partying. But I think fortunately for me, early on, I saw it as a liability for my career.
Yeah, it's the them and us thing. So this is what I tell people, when they're like, do you got a picture with so-and-so, I've worked with a lot of really, famous people, and like, you didn't take a fucking picture with him? I'm like, nah, I would never do that.
Yeah.
Why? Because there's them and us. And as soon as you take a picture, you're them.
Yeah.
When you don't do that, you're us. Right? So it's the same thing. Like, as soon as you cross that line and you're doing blow in front of everybody and you're getting wasted and you don't remember and you're around these people that you need respect in for your career, you no longer become them. I mean, you're no longer one of us. You're one of them, right?
Yeah.
Then you become like a groupie chick or whatever.
Yeah.
Right?
And especially getting into rock, it was tough for women. It's getting better, but it was like they needed one. And if you were lucky enough to be the one, good on you. But if you did something to fuck it up, there was just going to be someone else that was going to want to take your spot.
Absolutely.
And so I was always really, the one thing like growing up is this like psychotic work ethic I got from my family, where it was just like, just climb the ladder, climb the ladder, climb the ladder. You find it hard to have the balance, right? To sit back and enjoy your life because you're constantly like a shark trying to move forward. But I'm fortunate that I never got caught up with a lot of the partying stuff. I was around it all the time, but I was always the one that drove everybody home at the end of the night. They'd be like, "Oh, get mom to take you home. Carrie, come on, you got to drive her home or whatever." But like, I wouldn't catch the cocaine bag the wrong way in the movie. But like, when I met you the other day and we were just kind of sitting around shooting the shit, like I have so many friends that are in the military. My husband's a Marine, right? So like if you're watching an action movie and they don't get the gun stuff right.
Yeah, of course.
It's like, oh, come on. That's not right. That's not how we do it. And so anybody with any knowledge of drugs, they're going to know exactly what you pointed out. Like, that's not how you do it.
Yeah, you break the suspension of disbelief. And once you do that, I can't take anything in the movie seriously.
Yeah.
Right?
Was it hard for you to get the praise that you got from that film? Because the film's fantastic. And not just because you're in it, like, love that movie.
It was strange because then, around the same time that's happening now, I'm out touring with La Coca Nostra, which was the guys from House of Pain, me, Ill Bill. And, talk about life-changing very quickly. Like, I went from squatting in that warehouse to having a home in West Roxbury, being married, and traveling around the world, performing in front of 10, 20, 30,000 people at some of these festivals, right? And we were doing really well. And then the movie came out and got really well received. And
did you fight with your wife after the movie about the ending of Gone Baby Gone? Because that's the controversy. That's the debate.
We didn't fight about it, because there's a whole other experience going on there. She's at a movie premiere with me. I'm in a movie with Morgan Freeman and Ed Harris. She knows me since I was a kid.
Yeah.
I grew up in her house, right? So her family was like my stability. Like, I'm still very... when we got divorced, it was very difficult. And like, she went through a lot with my stuff that I ended up ultimately going through or dragging her through.
I don't mean fighting. I mean arguing about the ending of the movie.
Right.
Yeah.
But that's what I'm saying. Like, so it was more, she wasn't arguing about the movie because it was this emotional point where it was like, wow. Like, like it was this in my own life. So she didn't argue about the movie. She was blown away about how good the movie was, and that's why I can't remember what her view was on it. Like, I think you give the kid back to the mother.
Yeah.
No
way in hell.
I think now that you say it, though, I think she did think the kid should have stayed with Morgan Freeman.
That's a thing and we spent a lot of time, obviously being on the air in Boston at a radio station, and a movie comes out about Boston.
Yeah.
We always are going to rip apart the accents and rip apart whatever, which we couldn't with Gone Baby Gone because it was authentic.
It was real, yeah.
But we're all on the air talking about the ending of the movie. And it was like every friggin' guy was like, of course you give the kid back to the mother.
Yeah.
And all the girls were like, no! And like it was a huge debate. And it really is an interesting kind of experiment in psychology to analyze the end of that movie.
Well, it's also because the last shot of the movie, right? The mother, I met some guy off of whatever. He saw my special, right? Amy Ryan, she's from Queens, New York. She nailed the Boston accent.
Yeah, she did.
And she goes out with some guy she met who saw her on trash TV or whatever, right? And Casey Affleck is there with the kid sitting in like, what the fuck did I do? Right? It's again just a really well told story.
Yeah. And now you get springboarded into not only this music career but movies.
Yeah.
And all the while, you're getting this whole life that you either always wanted with the music or movies that you never imagined. I'm trying to imagine the pressure when you're doing all of that and battling an addiction the way that you were at the same time. Because you've been so vocal about your addiction battle and obviously the work that you do now.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just trying to imagine handling all of that and juggling it all. It's exhausting to think about.
The pressure and the feelings, right? Especially with that disease thing that I'm talking about, right? And so like the only way to do it, and I think I'm having fun too, which I got to qualify with this. I was still having a fucking blast. Like I think sometimes people leave that out with the addiction part because obviously ultimately there was some very difficult and life-threatening aspects to it and a lot of carnage in that path, but I was having a fucking ball, right? Like, cause now I'm living my dream, man. I mean, when I tell you, like, to walk onto movie sets like that and to tour around the world with my favorite childhood rap group, I mean, come on, man. Yeah. I went around the world. I never thought when I was writing those rhymes and putting them in that shoebox that my mother ended up finding that those would be plane tickets around the world. I got to see the world. And it's all a blur. It was all a blur, But I had a good fucking time.
So how do you know in the middle of all this, all the movies, the town, and like all of the stuff and all the music, how do you know I can't do it anymore?
I don't. I think I can. So every time I have to try to save the marriage or whatever it is, like I go to detox but I can't stay sober for like 30 days, I don't know how to do all that stuff that I have to do. So all that pressure is mounting, right? I remember being like up for a few days and I was like high and, I'm walking down the street. It was actually, ironically enough, it was in Adams Corner and a bunch of kids are like, somebody's yelling out. So, and the scary thing about it is like, I'm also on my toes all the time. So if someone's staring at me, I think they want to fight me, right? I can't tell you how many times I'm like, this fucking guy's staring at me.
That's a Boston thing too.
Yeah. Like, and I think,
the fuck are you looking at?
I think I got to get ready to fight. And then they come up to me 10 minutes later and they're like, dude, I'm a really big fan. Right. So that's like a whole dynamic to get used to. It's also like in these places that are home to me, like, like to be kind of like some, when after the town came out, the town was a big hit. Right. So everybody saw it. And also around the same time as that, the La Coca Nostra album came out, and it's like House of Pain reformed, got back together, put me in the group. So it became very much a thing where I no longer had space or privacy, and I'm out places, and people either hate you or love you, and it has nothing to do with you. You know what I mean? Which I didn't know at the time, but
that sensitive artist person that we talked about earlier, getting thrown into the fame of stuff, the lack of privacy, the feeling like you need to be something that they expect you to be because being you isn't going to be good enough anymore.
Right. And I think so, and I wouldn't say it was, I tend to have like a jaded perspective because I've worked with Ben and with Brad Pitt and guys like that, and the level of fame they experience, trust me, I have nothing to complain about. But it's still like at the time it was very strange. And I remember I had a panic attack. I went over to Lou's studio, like people, I was taking a bunch of pictures and like I couldn't walk down the street the right way for the first time. And I called a few people, but the best advice I got was from Danny Boy. He was like my big brother. And he's like, listen, buddy, I got good news. I got the good news for you and the bad news for you. He's like, the good news is it doesn't last forever. And the bad news is it doesn't last forever.
Great advice.
I've analyzed that and thought about that over the years, and it's because, there's an aspect to it where you're like, I don't want that. Like, it's very uncomfortable, and then there's an aspect of that's nice too, where you go places and you have access, and that's what we all want in life is access and freedom, and that's what comes with it. But it also takes away some freedom and
And then you forget, or not forget, but it makes it harder to figure out what's real and what's part of the show.
Yeah. Yeah. And you start, it's from the inside out and from the outside in, and who's really around you for the right reasons. Right. And, I think that's part of why Erica and I, my son's mom, why we're still great friends, because there's never been any question with her. Like, she calls me out on my shit. I remember when I got Killing Them Softly, which was the third movie I did, I remember she said, I don't want you to take it. I want you to turn down the role. And I was like, you fucking out of your mind. She's like, I want you to leave all this stuff behind, and I just want you to get like a job like at the post office or go back to school and do something or whatever. Like, this is killing you. And we got divorced right after that. But I think what I always know to be true with her is that she doesn't give a fuck about any of that. She knows the real me. We have been friends through the ups, the downs. Like, she's remarried with kids and everything. Like, her kids call me Uncle George. Like, she's my real friend who's going to call me on my shit, and I'll call her on hers. And that's like a rare thing, what I'm saying? So, and it's a beautiful thing. So even when she pushes my buttons and gets me upset about something and we disagree with things, or she calls me out on my shit, I know it's real. I know she's doing it from a real place. She don't give a shit about Slaine,
The industry that you're talking about navigating is filled with those sensitive artists, the creatives.
Yeah.
And so addiction is part of it, because it's all of these people that are trying to make this art, that are trying to tell their stories and wrestle their demons of their upbringing and all of these things. And it's this fine balancing line between being able to handle it and not.
Yeah.
And you've been sober now for over 8 years, right?
That's right.
So why did it work the last time? How have you been able to pull it off when you couldn't stay sober for 30 days before? What was different with the last time?
I think what was different this time, because I tried for so long, almost 2 decades, I never could get to 30 days. And the longest I had was 77 days when we were shooting The Town. So, like, if the opportunity is great like that was like a game changer, right? So, and, or the consequence, so there's 2 things that inspire people to be sober: fear or love. And I had a good dose of both this next time, because I had lost the marriage, lost the house, was unknowingly to myself losing my career, and I was the last one to know any of this stuff. And, I had supervised visits with my son, and her family, who I grew up with loving so much, they were really kind of my surrogate family. I had really done the wrong thing publicly for a while, and I think like that it was strained. And I think the next thing that I was about to lose was my relationship with my son, and I just wasn't willing to lose that. So I came to a point where I had that fear of that, and this real like deep love, like true unconditional love, which I have for my son, and I had even when I was drinking and getting high. But I think it was what gave me the willingness to do anything that I had to do to get sober. And in the beginning, it meant I had to do what she had said to me about Killing Them Softly, like turn it down, walk away from this all, right? I was like, I have to give up music, because every time I relapse, I'm going in the studio and I can't write, I can't record, and I can't walk out on stage. I have to give this up in order to be a father to my son. And it was so hard, because it was like, talk about being scared. Like, I didn't know how to deal with life without it. It was so much a part of who I was that I didn't want to give it up. And, but I had to, because I love my son more.
That's a big thing to be able to say and follow up with action. You got to be a really strong individual to finally be able to say, okay, it's going to be different.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if it was strong. I think I was just afraid, and I loved my son, and I didn't want to lose him. You know, like,
yeah.
I would love to tell you, like, you know, I'm just really, like, strong. But I don't know that I'm really strong. I think, like you said, I'm sensitive, but I think, like, it's love, you know. And I love my son. I'd do anything for my son, and to know that, and also, like, I'm just in and out of the emergency room. I'm like, my body is failing. You know, everything around me is crumbling. Like I was just finished. Like I was beaten. It beat me. And but even with that, like, that's not enough. Like, just that's not enough to keep you sober. So, like, I had to work a program, and Danny Boy, who, like I said, he's like a big brother to me, and he had tried to help me get sober over and over, and this time he's like, hey, it saved your seat, man. Why don't you meet me over here today? And thank God, you know, thank God.
So him doing that for you, is that what inspired you to help other people get sober? Is that the way of paying it forward?
That's like part of the process. So I work a 12-step program, and so I went through these steps, and it's like, I don't know how familiar you are with that process, but it's a very humbling experience, you know, because you're looking at all these things that are tough to look at. And
I've had people I love come to me for the forgiveness and the atonement and the acknowledging of the things that they had done wrong. So I've been able to watch people successfully get sober and struggle with it and relapse and start over again. So I've seen it from the outside, but I can't even imagine what it's like to go on that journey yourself.
It's a daily thing, right? So it's like, with the knowledge, and I think that's one of the things that clicked for me. Is like, I always thought it was the substance. It's the substance that's the problem. It's the alcohol. It's the cocaine. It's the Xanax. It's whatever it is, right? And it has nothing to do with that, right? My problem is me and the way that I'm perceiving things. It's a disease of perception. So I had to do the work on that, and I continue to have to. It's like, you know, I'm still an alcoholic and an addict. Like, it doesn't go away. It's a condition that I have, that if I do these things that have been laid out to me by other people that, you know, have gotten sober and are in recovery, that paid it forward to me, they gave it to me. If I do these things daily, then I can get through another day sober. So, and when I say that, I think I know it's different for everybody, but what I've found, like, is there's no cheat around this stuff. Like, I can either do it and have good sobriety, or I can not do it and I can fucking struggle. And I've done both at different times. And trust me, I'm much better off. Like, there is a solution to this thing, and when I'm actively in it, then I feel really good. There's been very few times during my sobriety that I thought about picking up, like, outside of the beginning where I thought about it every second of every day. But over time, like, very rarely, like, and trust me, I'll still eat my feelings, or, you know, or shop or gamble or something like that. Like, there's other destructive things.
Yeah, you're not a monk.
I'm not a saint by any means, but I haven't had the need to pick up a drink or a drug.
Do you think society is more accepting of addiction and the process, that it's less of a stigma now to talk about tackling it than it would have been, say, 10, 20, 30 years ago? Great
progress, but still a stigma. You know, it's still a really difficult stigma. And that's, you know, there's a few reasons I do what I do now. You know, I still make music, I still act, but that I've become so involved in this aspect of you know, building a resource for people, right? Like, but I think, like, what inspired that was my own recovery, but also I lost my train of thought.
You're talking about the stigma and how it's changed.
Oh yeah, so I think part of what really has inspired me to do this stuff is breaking the stigma, because I don't have, like, an office job that I need to show up to, that somebody is going to look at me a certain way if I'm an alcoholic or an addict, right? So I have I'm able to be transparent and upfront with this, and I know because over time, like when I started being transparent in my recovery and all that, people have reached out to me and over and over, and I start to get these messages and how much it means and how much it helps people. I've also had people because I talk to a lot of people online and follow up with them, and they follow up with me.
I looked at all of your socials, obviously knowing that you were going to come in and sit down with me, and I was amazed at the comments about what we're talking about, that people are just so open and honest to just talk about it in the comments of your social media pages.
Yeah, but I've also, I remember I was talking to one kid in Canada, and he ended up relapsing and dying, and then his mother reached out back to me through his account on Facebook and had saw that we were talking and everything, and she's like, I just want to let you know. And then I called her, and she was like, it's there's a lot of tough stories like that, you know what I mean? So, and that is ultimately what really gave me the drive to do this, is like my best friend Mike, who I told you I spit those rhymes to when I was a little kid. He had this disease too, and he passed away in 2017 when I was 3 years sober, and I was trying to help him directly. Like I was working with him, meeting with him every day as part of this program that we do together, and he had 44 days sober, and he passed away.
I'm so sorry.
So, but I went like cold at that point. I started to think, I was on this pink cloud for the first 3 years of my sobriety, and I was helping everybody, and I was, doing all that stuff. And then when he passed away, I really took it to heart, and I was, thought it was my fault. And if I only did this or I did that, I ended up kind of just refocusing on my career and doing all this other stuff, and until I came to a point when I was about 5.5 years sober, and I went through a really difficult time, and had a series of losses and unfortunate events, and my heart was broken, and I woke up one day and I thought, I'm going to drink, I'm going to get high, if I don't do something. And I started going down to Mass Ave with my friend's mother, who goes down there like every Saturday, and I started using my social media to go collect clothes for people down there, and we went down in the winter and brought food down, and I would walk in the tent, and I realized like I was making an amends to Mike there, because when I walked out of there, he was down there for a while, and then I just, I started turning everything that I did into a charity event. I started working with this guy, and this guy, Matt Gannum. A lot of people know him around here. He's big in the recovery community, and he had me like coming out and speaking and running groups and stuff like that. And then, the pandemic, that was right at the beginning of the pandemic. So for the first time in my adult life, like I'm not on the road, I'm not touring, I'm at home, and I end up, kind of just going to all these different sober livings and halfway houses and treatment centers. And
between mental health and addiction, the pandemic had an immeasurable effect on some
devastating.
people. Yeah.
Devastating. Because I talk about like those, so many of us in recovery, we work these programs, right? We convene, we help each other, we go through this process. Like you said, somebody approached you with like an amends, right? So it's like we have to do this stuff, or a lot of us find that we do, and a lot of us love it, me included. Like I need that connection with people who are also walking on that path, and to be able to help other people. So with the pandemic, like that blew all that out of the frame. People aren't meeting anymore, and I wondered how it would affect people. What I saw, the numbers came out like a couple months ago, right? Like the overdoses have almost doubled since the beginning of the pandemic. And they were already 69,000 deaths a year, right? It was, so just to put that in perspective, the Vietnam War, 67,000 American soldiers were lost. That's over 17 years. Every year we have a Vietnam War in America with addiction.
If you've ever been to the wall, it's overwhelming. The names, right? That you're standing in front of this physical manifestation of that level of loss.
Yeah.
And that happens every year here because of addiction.
100,000 people last year which is almost double that 67,000 number, you know.
It's unbelievable.
It's devastating. And so I think through this, you know, again, it's the universe pushing me, right? Like, you know, all of a sudden I can't tour. I mean, the things leading into that, which I'm not going to go into great detail about, but it was just soul crushing, like really heartbreaking stuff. And then now, you know, it's very difficult in the moment sometimes for me to see that golden thread of the universe. But when I look back, I can always see it, right? It's
hindsight.
Like I had to go through that stuff to push me to this thing to be able to do what I'm doing now. And now it's like, I mean, you talk about unlikely things when you talk about that little kid becoming a rapper and how unlikely that is. Like, I don't have that story, that quintessential, like, Mike Tyson type of story that propelled me into hip hop or whatever. Like, you know, my story is a little different than that. And so how unlikely it was for me to become, you know, this touring artist who's touring the world with House of Pain and all that stuff, and working with DJ Premier and Cypress Hill, Snoop Dogg, you know what I mean? Like, I've done some pretty cool shit and to do these movies, but I don't think anything is more unlikely if you looked at the version of me 10 years ago than opening up this detox and CSS facility right now. Like, that, it blows my mind every day. And, you know, it's called Charles River Recovery. And, you know, there's so much that goes into it, you know, 'cause there's a great group of people, and I know some of these guys for many years, and to be a part of putting it all together, because you don't think about, like, oh, there's got to be, like, a cafeteria and food and the food service, and, you know, there's so many aspects to it, and it's just like, you can get, there's been so much of it over the course of the year of putting this all together, and the licensing, and there's just so much red tape that it's way too much for just a small group of people to do. It takes this big effort from all these really talented, dedicated individuals, doctors, nurses, like, you know, just phenomenal
We're
people.
all focused and motivated on the same goal.
Yeah, and to be a part of that, and then to walk on the floor, like, and see the guests. I like to call them guests, right? I don't like patients or clients. I don't like that neither. I like guests. These are our guests. These are people that we want to help, you know, and to see those people and see their faces and the stories. You talk about names on the wall, right? Like, we want these people not on that wall. We want to keep them off that wall, you know? And, you know, I've seen people turn their lives around and live these beautiful lives and, like, repair relationships and be good parents. That's really what I got sober for. I wanted to be a good dad. And I get to be that now.
It's huge. It's an amazing turn of events and kind of everything coming full circle, that you've gone on this amazing journey and ended up in a place that probably 20 years ago you never could have even imagined would have been possible.
Never. And, like, you know, like, I love acting, and I love making music, and like I said, it's been like a fantastic ride that I still love doing to this day. But the coolest thing I ever got to be, the coolest thing that I get to be today, and the coolest thing I've ever done is be a father to my son. There's nothing cooler than that. Nothing.
Does he think you're cool, or is he at that point where he's just like, because, like, we bring up Slash. I asked him once in an interview because he had teenagers, and I was like, do your kids know how cool you are? And he was like, they make me drop them off down the street. That's cool.
I mean, you know, it's funny because I don't know if he does or not. I think he thinks I'm cool to some extent, but, like, I'll take him up to the baseball field. He'll be like, Dad, turn the music down. You know, 'cause I'm, like, bumping the music, and he's embarrassed by that. But I did hear him say, he was like, oh, that kid has on, like, dad sneakers. And I was like, dad sneakers? What are you talking about? You know, like, I wear Jordans. He's like, not you. You're not like a normal dad. So to me, that was like, he thinks I'm cool.
Yeah, you got some cool points. Absolutely.
I also heard him say one time, like, I put on I won't say who the rapper is, but I put on a record, and he's like, this guy sucks. He's not even close to as good as you. I thought that was cool too.
Oh my God. I want to ask you some, well, first of all, I want to say that Charles River Recovery, I have it linked in the show notes of this episode so people can find it really easily, get all of the information about it. I want to ask you about if you were, like I'm trying to imagine, like, you know, you're in the car with the 13-year-old, right? Go back and all the music you love, all of it. And I ask songwriters this question all the time. Can you give me a song example of a song that you think is so perfectly crafted that it's perfect and you wish you wrote it by someone else? Doesn't matter who it is, doesn't matter the genre, but you look at that and go, from a songwriter's perspective, that in the craft, that is perfect. But then you got to tell me why.
Oh, that's difficult.
I know. Music people, there's so many examples.
I mean, you know, because I don't know, like going back in time and all that, but I'll say this, and I always, you know, people compare me to him, and he's obviously a huge artist, so I tend to stay away from like ever even discussing his work, but I will say that Eminem had a song, you know, obviously he like smashed his mother and all that for years and all that, and then there was a song on the Marshall, I think it was a Marshall Mathers LP 2, I can't remember what record it's on, but it was like an amends to his mother, where he's apologizing and talking about forgiving her and stuff, because now she has like this mental disorder and all that. And it was the first time I heard it. I was driving to a meeting one night, and it came on, and I related to it, not with my mother, but in a different aspect, like with, you know, a similar type of thing. And I was just bawling. I was like bawling because it just hit something in me that was like, oh my God. Yeah, like it's fucking heartbreaking. Like these people that are supposed to like be our caretakers, and then we like have this hatred and this resentment against them, and then have to come to a moment of truth where it's like underneath that hate and resentment, that bitter resentment, there's still like a love, and you got to find forgiveness, but it's just unworkable and unmanageable and can never be fixed. And it's just like, fuck.
Well, they're supposed to know everything.
Life.
You get born and you think that your parents are supposed to know everything. And then you get older. Some people have their own kids, some not, but you realize they didn't know shit.
Yeah.
Because I don't know shit. And I'm older than they were when they had me.
It's just like this life is just fucking something, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like, there's so many layers to everything. Like there's no, like, you don't graduate. Like there's no, all right, well, you figured it all out now.
You never get good at it.
It's always something that's like, fuck, this is like fucking difficult, you know? How do you fucking deal with this? And I try to be really upfront with my son with that stuff. Like, look, man, I made a lot of fucking mistakes. You're probably not going to, any mistake you're going to make, I probably made it too. I got your back no matter what. I love you no matter what. So come to me with your shit. I'll help you the best I can always. I'll never judge you for your shit. You know, that's because I fucked up a lot. You know, like that's one of the biggest things that recovery gave me is I forgive myself.
That's huge.
It took me a long time to get to that, but I forgive myself. Like I fucked up a lot of shit. I was shitty. I did shitty things to people I love. And I was doing the best I could with the tools I had at that time. And there were plenty of reasons behind why, you know, like I was angry in that way. And, you know.
Forgiveness does not come easy for me.
It's the hardest thing for me too.
Yeah, it's really hard. I'm one of those people that if you cross me, I don't want to give you the opportunity to do it again.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's tough.
It's tough, man.
Yeah.
That's the hardest part. Like, you know, I came to that like 5 years into when I was going through that stuff that I was saying where I felt like I was going to use. And I met this guy and he was telling me, he's like, look, you can't transmit something you haven't got. Like, you're having a hard time forgiving people because you don't forgive yourself. He's like, you got to forgive yourself. And that was hard.
That's life-changing advice.
I wrote out of resentment all the things I resented myself for, because we do that in the program, right? Like we write out all these resentments we have, and we look at them, and we look at what our side of it is and all that, right? And I wrote out, so I wrote extensive resentment inventories, and the one I wrote on myself was longer than all the rest of my resentments combined. And I actually did a song called Legend of the Fall where I sit down with myself and talk to myself with some of the resentments I have against myself. It's not quite as in-depth as that inventory was, but yeah, that was like a freeing experience because it's like, fuck, man, look at all this shit I fucked up, and I was doing the best I could, and, you know, at the end of the day, it's in the past. Like, I just could have tried to do the right thing today, and everybody fucks up.
Well, I used to think, like, I had a lot of surgeries as a kid, that, like, those scars were ugly, right? And as you get older, especially I think as a woman, that you look at the gray hairs or the wrinkles as imperfections. And I think the older I get, they're the things that I'm the most proud of, because you've survived the stuff you've survived, because not everybody gets to. Yeah. Not everybody gets to get old. It's a gift to get old, right. To have wrinkles, to have gray hair, to have scars, because that means that you went through some shit and survived it. And so the honor of getting to the point where you're old and scarred and wrinkly and gray and ridden hard and put away wet, like, that's a gift.
It's gratitude, right?
Yeah.
Like finding that gratitude and all of it.
Yeah, but it's hard. A lot of people listen to the show, and we talked about it, musicians are some of the most well-traveled people in the world. They've seen places. So I want you to tell me somewhere in the world that you've gone, and tell me about the meal you had there, the thing you saw, whatever that you loved. But then I want you to tell me what it is that you love about Boston, and for somebody that was, say, going to come here, where they should go. So where have you been that you loved? What did you do there?
Well, it's, you know, I think, and this is kind of this was always my problem financially, is I like the experience and the feeling more than so like, to me, it's never like a place. It's always like the energy, right?
Yeah.
The vibe. And there's some places like that, like Rome to me is just fucking like beyond what I could have ever comprehended, like that there's a place like that exists. Like, oh my God, like it's like stepping into this other world. Like, it's another time, you know, and the people and the energy. Like, I always say, you know, when we're touring in Europe, it's funny because it's all right there. It's all on top of each other, and there are all these different cultures. And you go somewhere like Germany or Switzerland, and they're much more apt to kind of like watch you with their arms crossed and clap, you know, where like in Italy, they're fucking bouncing off the walls. You know what I'm saying? They don't speak a lick of English, but they know every word, and they're fucking bouncing
Italians
off the
are
walls.
passionate, and their emotions are like right on the surface all the time. Ask my husband.
Yeah. And the food is just amazing. But I could say the same thing about Paris when it's, you know, Paris obviously has its own dynamic, but just the beauty of Paris. And, you know, there's these just like the meals and the, you know, there's a reason it's like that romantic city, right? These beautiful French women and the amazing food and the buildings and the architecture and the art. I mean, it's just like beautiful, phenomenal stuff. So I mean, I love those places.
So if somebody were going to come to Boston, like, because you're the insider guy, right? You're the guy that lives there. So if someone's going to come to Boston, what are a couple of things that might not be like, you know, not Freedom Trail and Duck Tour Boston, but
that's what I'm saying. Like in the culture and the community. If you asked me that 10 years ago, like I would have told you like a specific bar room to meet me at or whatever. And it's like, you know, to me now, like, you know, and I hope this doesn't bore people, but it'll be like one of these, you know, like some of these sober livings that I go into or meeting, and like, you know, people are, to me, it's like it's the most beautiful thing it's where I go to find hope and where I go to find perseverance, where people, against all, we talk about these difficult things in life and these impossible situations to navigate, and this pain and this trauma and all that. And here are these real people who are stepping up one day at a time to, like, you know, come together as to fight for their life today, to show up for their kid today. Like, I find, so many people. To me, that's the spirit in Boston that we have. And it doesn't just have to be with alcoholics and addicts, but it's that we show up. We show up for each other, and we have that spirit of community where, we walk through the shit with each other.
Well, it's why I think it's such a passionate sports town, and why we're so loyal when our teams suck for so long, because we're going through the shit together.
Yeah.
And why we're such obnoxious fans when we win.
Well, do you remember? Obviously, like after the marathon bombing or after 9/11, and you just see the way the people come together here. Like I know they say like Boston's strong and all that, but just when the shit hits the fan, we come together as a community, and that's what I love about Boston. That's the best thing about Boston. And for me, it's home. It's always going to be home.
Yeah.
So I can do these amazing shows overseas or be in New York City or whatever, and it's like when I come home, it feels like home. That's always the most special place for me to perform, is always in Boston.
And it's always a like you can go into any like restaurant or like whatever and like sit down next to a stranger, and like you're going to end up walking out of there with like a hilarious story, because we'll make conversation with anybody. People think we're rude and like in your face, which we can be, but it's more of just like, hey, how you doing? What are you doing? Where'd you come from? And it's like, some people are like, why the fuck are you asking me something? Leave me alone. I just want to eat my spaghetti.
Yeah, and so you talk about the discomfort, like when the town popped off and the Coke is popping and people start to, like, that I think is why I struggled with that so much. It's like, I'm you, man. I'm just one of us. Like, I'm nobody. I ain't special or anything crazy. Like, it's just, I need this community. I like this community. I want to be a part of it. Like, I am part of it, So. And
it's why a lot of people, once they come here, they don't want to go anywhere. It's like people say, oh, you work in the music business. Like, you could go to New York or LA. I'm like, yeah, no. I like going to those places,
to visit, yeah.
But I got to get the hell out of there.
Yeah.
5 days in LA, 5 days in Vegas, and I'm like, can I get home?
Yeah.
Because it's not real.
Yeah. So New York and LA are like separate, are like secondary homes to me, where I have like a community of people that I really love. But I mean, Boston's home. It's always going to be.
Yeah. And by the way, I know that you're in the suburbs right now.
Yeah.
Like, when I try, it's like, where are you from? Boston.
Yeah.
Because unless they've ever been here, if they say, oh, what part? Then I'm like, oh, okay. They're either from Boston. And then I'm like, well, I grew up in the suburbs. Like,
yeah, it's fun. That's a funny thing. So, spending most of my life living in different neighborhoods in Boston, people get really offended by that. You ain't from Boston. You're from, when people say that. But having like a greater worldview and being in different places, like, Cambridge, and I'll probably catch 10 emails from this messages, but Cambridge to me is part of Boston. Somerville's part of Boston.
It is.
Quincy's part of Boston. Yeah. It's all what gives Boston its. There's only 700,000 people that live in the city limits of Boston.
Yeah.
What makes Boston a major city is greater Boston. It's all of it put together. We need all that shit to have juice. We need, and it's still got the culture everywhere. And
according to the like Nielsen, right? When you talk about like media market ratings,
yeah.
According to them, you are in Boston right now.
Yeah. But it's also what makes us a great sports town is that we are a major market, according to Nielsen, which is what it goes by anyway.
That's right.
That's why we are able to spend $170 million on the baseball team's payroll, because there is such a wide viewership and listenership, right?
Yeah.
So, and the other thing is like, everybody on the North Shore is like descendants from Charlestown and you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like that side of the city. And then you got people like, in Walpole and that area, and that's all coming from Rosendale and Hyde Park and West Roxbury. And, it's like.
My family came from Arlington back in the day. They just.
Yeah, and then like, Quincy and Weymouth and the South Shore, that's all Dorchester and Southie people that moved out there. So it's like,
You go up north, you got to have a favorite roast beef sandwich. You go down south, you got to have a favorite bar pizza. Like,
yeah, Cape Cod pizza in Brockton, so good. Can't eat pizza right now. I was saying to my girlfriend last night, I was like, I'm fucking dying for a pizza. Like,
I know. Once you get your gallbladder out, you'll definitely feel better. I've been through the surgery, but it sucks for like a week.
I haven't had red meat for 5 weeks. I haven't had pizza for 5 weeks. I haven't had soda. I haven't had cheese. I haven't had dairy. There's a lot.
The last
it's
meal.
the best thing for me, by the way.
100%.
I shouldn't be eating that shit all the time, but.
The last meal I had before I found out what was wrong with me, I had a buffalo chicken salad.
Yeah.
With the buffalo tenders all cut up.
Yeah.
Ate the shit out of that. Like a half hour later, I thought I was dying. Ended up in the ambulance bay of St. E's in the old AAF van because my gallbladder was about to burst. I almost died while I was on the air.
Oh, the fucking pain is insane.
It's so awful.
It hurts so bad. Like the first attack I had was on Super Bowl Sunday. And I'm sitting on the couch. I didn't see one play in the Super Bowl. I actually hit a square for $1,250 that I looked at on my phone. Like, so I got a text message saying I hit the square or whatever, and I was vomiting for 5 hours straight. You know how usually you throw up, you get a 10-minute break, and then you get nauseous again? This was not that. This was like vomiting nonstop for 5 hours straight until eventually I passed out because my body was so exhausted. Like, my muscles were all shaking in my body. It was brutal. And I thought it was food poisoning. And then I got a few more of them, but that pain in your stomach, oh my God, in my back, my stomach lining.
Yeah. The gallbladder's nothing to fuck with.
Yeah.
It's like, and only people that have been through it know.
It's like Wu-Tang Clan.
Ain't nothing to fuck with. Thank you so much for coming and hanging out with me.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I appreciate you driving out where the dragons live and coming to MCHQ. It's not often that I have visitors down here.
Well, listen, we both like the craft, right? And the sound quality. That's why it needs to sound good. I don't want to do it on Zoom. And I know you got a system to make it sound good and everything, but
this was what I did during COVID.
Plus, to sit across and like have a real conversation. That's a beautiful thing.
Over some coffee.
That's it.
Well, I appreciate you coming and making the drive out to where the dragons live. A lot of my friends in the city give me shit because I live in the burbs, so I appreciate you making the ride.
It's all good.
You pull up in your pimp mobile out there. I was like, of course he's driving that thing.
It's just simple, black Lincoln.
Yeah, just a black Lincoln. I want to be comfortable while I'm driving. There he is, the one and only Slaine, or as his mom calls him, George. He's a Renaissance man. He's a hip-hop artist and writer. He's an acclaimed actor. He's a recovery advocate, and he's the Chief Community Relations Officer at Charles River Recovery. And if you go to the show notes of this episode, you'll find all of Slaine's links, his website and all his social media links, and you'll also find the link to Charles River Recovery. Also in the show notes is the link to this week's corresponding playlist. Every full-length episode of the Mistress Carrie podcast gets a playlist where you can find all of my guest music and all of the music that we referenced in the interview. If you liked what you heard, don't forget to like and subscribe to the Mistress Carrie podcast. New full-length episodes come out every Wednesday. Plus, every weekday, you get the sit rep. All of your rock news and music headlines and industry info, and it's all in under 5 minutes. Plus, you never know when we're going to release a bonus episode. You can join me every Tuesday night at 8:30 Eastern, live on my official Facebook page for my video streaming show, Cocktails in the War Room. And of course, you can always join me on the Mistress Carrie radio show. Head to MistressCarrie.com for the details on all of it. The Mistress Carrie podcast, a proud member of the Pantheon Podcast Network.
The Venture X card from Capital One gives you premium travel benefits, perfect for seeing Taylor Swift the Eras Tour. Presented by Capital One. Ooh, I do love her. Earn 5 times miles on flights and 10 times miles on hotels through Capital One Travel.
Enjoy your stay in Suite 13.
Whoa, 13? That's Taylor's lucky number. The Venture X card from Capital One. What's in your wallet?
Terms apply. See CapitalOne.com for details.
By now, you know that sound. It's the sound of the Home Depot. But what about those sounds? Those are the sounds of an LG wash tower with ultra-large capacity, serving up a powerful yet gentle clean in just 29 minutes. making this the sound of savings on the best appliance brands. The Home Depot. How doers get more done. Get up to 25% off the LG wash tower with ultra-large capacity and reduced wash time. Pricing valid January 5th through January 25th, 2023. Gas Dryer Extra. U.S. only. See store or online for details.